Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Tyre Talk. We've got a bit of a special episode today. We're very grateful to be joined by a massive F1 content creator, YouTuber, podcaster. He's just about to hit 300,000 subscribers on YouTube. It is Tommo. How are you doing today, my friend?
I'm good. I swear I've been so close to 300,000 for so long now because it's properly like
Yeah,
the sub growth has properly like leveled off. I think because this season isn't the most exciting, is it? Compared to,
yeah.
I mean, when I started was what middle of the 2019 season, and then 2020 was really good. 2021 was obviously mad. So yeah, it's kind
Yeah,
of the sport gives as much as it takes away. But I'm sure we'll get back to
yeah.
2021 levels soon enough. So, but it's good to be here, lads. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, well, thank you for coming on. Yeah, we just thought we thought we'd throw our name in the hat for see if we can get some interviews, and we've struck gold on this one. So yeah, thank you very much for coming on. Um, Thought why not just start with last weekend? How did you think the F1 the Monaco Grand Prix went?
Well, look, I'm a bit of a Monaco defender. I've kind of made my bed and
Same.
and sit on that side of things. So obviously, when it goes well, it's like, yeah, of course it does because it's Monaco. It's great. Look, I think we're all acutely aware of the issues running around a track like Monaco. Like if someone pitched Monaco today and there wasn't all the history and it was like this new Grand Prix, there's no way it would go through. Like it just wouldn't happen because it's such a comedically. I mean, how slow they were going through the hairpin at times was mad. Look, uh, last weekend doesn't solve all the issues that they still are. There still is with Monaco that still exists to an extent. I still think there's a few things that should change to make the rule like in F2 where they have the split qualifying, for example, just around Monaco. I think there's a few things they need to change to, good compared to Catalonia, it's like a totally
Yeah,
different circuit. But yeah, ultimately, I think we're meant to have 24 races. If there's no cancellations, 24 races. There's room for something like Monaco where the emphasis is on Saturday, and then it's more of a strategic battle and a battle of not hitting the walls and not losing your concentration on a Sunday. And it's not so much wheel to wheel. I think there's enough races for there to be space for that. So yeah,
mm.
I still think there's things that need to change, but ultimately, I'm happy it was a good race because we needed a good
Yeah.
Monaco Grand Prix.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree. And we actually did a track tier list a couple of weeks ago now, and I staunchly defended Monaco. Like I say, it's a historic Grand Prix, and it's one of a kind. And these two both put it in the get rid column.
Has
Can't
it
believe it.
changed
I
your
agree.
opinion, lads? Last weekend, has it changed it at all?
I think it was interesting on when the rain came about, but like I say, it's still I think it should be temporarily got rid of until they make the cars smaller because it was still like I say they were smashing into each other in the airpin,
Hmm.
and you've got apart from Fernando could have he could have won the race, but like once Max got past Sandoval, it was still pretty much nailed on, wasn't it, that he was going to walk away with it. And like I say, I agree with you in the fact that there's room for it, like the event and the spectacle. But like I won't be adverse to just putting it on hiatus for a bit until the cars are a bit smaller.
Do you think that's realistic? I guess that's the one thing, isn't it? Because like from a safety point of view, that's why the cars are so like big now and why they're so heavy as well. Like because they need a certain amount of like so I don't know, maybe in time if development in kind of materials and maybe they could make the cars a bit smaller to still give the same level of protection to drivers. I just think, yeah, there's not a perfect solution that keeps it on the calendar and keeps it kind of relevant. But look, I still think a mandatory two stop would help somewhat because even
Yeah.
before the rain came, when people were pitting, that's when you're like, okay, I need to focus on what's going on now because you can mess up a pit stop. For me, that is just something they could do, just a rule change that's easy
Mm.
that would somewhat improve it. It wouldn't fix all the problems, of course, but it would somewhat improve it, in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, I was saying, I think on our last episode that I feel like Monaco kind of epitomizes what could be changed about F1, especially this season to make it better. Like you say, like when it's just cars going around the track with a one stop strategy, they're all doing the same thing. Doesn't change much. Whereas, do you feel like maybe Monaco does summarize what could be changed in F1, like the car size and pit strategy?
Yeah, I mean, it's Monaco is a track that's been on the calendar for you know decades now, and it's something it hasn't aged well, I guess, ultimately, right? Unlike plenty of other historic tracks, which can expand and have width and all that. When it's a street circuit, it is the original street circuit, and it shows its age because the cars have changed so much over the years. I mean, it's funny because you look at even like the early 90s cars that Senna and Prost would have driven. They're actually really big cars if you see them in person compared to like a mid 2000s car, which was tiny. And we see the Formula E, for example, like Formula E racing around Monaco. That's one of the best Formula E races, I think, because it's got that character, and the cars are small enough. They're not so downforce reliant. And if we want to keep Formula One, what makes it Formula One with the exposed wheels, the wings, then in this day and age, I think the technology is there to make these cars better racing. You're never going to get wall-to-wall battles at Monaco. That's just not going to happen. But again, I think this wall-to-wall battles and overtakes aren't the only measurement of a good race, and so much of it is the story of when Ricciardo had his broken down Red Bull and he still kept it ahead, like just lap after lap after lap. Like there's not always, there's often a story that can be pulled that makes the Monaco Grand Prix. Look, maybe Bernie was right all along and we do need sprinklers. I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, wasn't there something like 116 overtakes in the E-Prix at Monaco or something a few weeks ago? It's just crazy. And we say the main difference between Formula E, sort of maybe the car design, are they a lot narrower? Like say less downforce dependent.
Smaller, less dirt, so that you're not so affected. Because I mean, those wings aren't generating any downforce in a Formula E car, are they? They're just there for show.
No.
They're basically like touring cars with exposed wheels. So, and that's what makes it. Again, that's the challenge, right? You look at Formula One even in the 90s, because the aero was so much simpler. Yeah, dirty air was still a thing, but it wasn't such a. I mean, you look like mid 2000s, like 2008, them cars were just ridiculous. The vanes and all that, like you had no shot overtaking. So I just think that's, if we want the sport to retain that kind of formula to it, like the formula style, then tracks like Monaco, they're not gonna, because even if you had no wings on the F1 cars at all, like the physical size of them would still stop you getting loads of overtakes, but you would get more, I guess. More chaos.
Yeah.
Just take the wings off for Monaco. That's it. Sorted.
It would change a lot with it. I mean, I suppose. I mean, even then, we got. I mean, where do you think that qualifying session sort of stands in terms of the best qualifying sessions maybe ever? Really.
Yeah, I mean, it's got. Look, I know recency bias is a thing, of course, right? It's fresh in the mind, but I mean, it had everything, didn't it? Like even Q1, where the times were ramping up. There was a moment Joe was P1, then Alex was P1. Shouting, man. And like it was just like the story over like all the sessions, and it was just continually improving. Obviously, Checo made the mistake, but it didn't massively ruin anyone else's lap, and that was a big part of why Q3 was good, because like no one shunted. And even though, a certain Max Verstappen came very close to many a time, yet just absolutely nailed it. And you think like, when Ocon went pole, then Charles took it, then Fernando took it, and then right at the end, Max got it. Like it was the whole story, and the way it was broadcast was just, it was just again and again and again. And you kept thinking like, I don't know about you boys, but I was like, I was sat in the back of a cab watching it on my phone. And even there, I was like, and I kept like losing signal. I was like, fuck. At Q3, it sorted me out and it was fine. And I was just like, the cab must have thought I don't know. He obviously wasn't an F1 fan, because he didn't react at all when I was like screaming my head off in the back.
I was actually really ill on that day myself. I got like 20 minutes of good vision, and I managed to watch the dregs of Q1 and Q2, and then I managed to get proper, actually be able to watch Q3, and it was brilliant. It was really, like I said, got my heart going a little bit. Max on that last lap, I saw two tenths down on Alonso. I thought there's no chance he's getting anywhere near.
Have you seen the breakdown from Palmer that he's done on the F1 channel by any chance?
Yeah, I have. Yeah.
It's like, it's ridiculous, man.
Crazy.
It's ridiculous. Like that last sector,
But
man. It's just a joke.
He's just a maniac, isn't he, Max? Like, and you touched on Alex there as well. We know you're big fan of him. How do you think his season's gone so far?
Um, ah, it's difficult in that Williams when you've got a teammate who's a rookie as well, right? Because it's hard to get a measure of, how much is like, for example, at the start of the season, I think we're thinking, oh, mate, the Alpha Tower is a really weak car, but then you look at Yuki's results and where he's been running in the races, and he's actually been on the cusp of points pretty much every race for large portions. So same with Alex. I think we saw at Monaco that Williams just had no pace, but we know it's not, that's a downforce track, and that Williams has all the downforce of a NASCAR. So I think that I think he's doing as good a job as he can do. I don't think that's not the seat he's going to really be able to prove his, like, is he actually capable of being at that, considered in those same conversations as, George and Lando, who he came up through the junior categories with and came up through F2 with. I think obviously the hit that took to his stock, getting that Red Bull opportunity, that's still going to take time to overcome. But I do believe there's a genuinely, high potential racing driver there, and I think almost the adversity that he's been through is going to help him in the long term, help kind of shape him. It's not, if you're just winning all the time, you're not going to get those same lessons that you are from the kind of humbling he somewhat got in 2020. So yeah, I'm from an Albon point of view, I'm satisfied that he's doing a good job, and I just hope Williams can give him and Logan, because I was a big fan of Logan last year in F2 as well, like give them both the car to actually showcase what they can do, and he's somewhat getting those opportunities. I think they'll be much better in Catalonia, but there's a lot of high speed, medium speed, which still isn't great for them. But Alex is he's mainly getting into Q2 most of the time, which I think's credit to him.
yeah, for where that car is, that's pretty good, isn't it? Yeah.
What do you see his next steps as well? Do you think he should be in the Williams for long term, or maybe a project like Audi might tempt him later down the line?
Yeah, I mean that's got to be a tempting move, isn't it? I think if you're Audi and you see, it depends how much you kind of believe, I guess, because Williams were weighing up, was it Albon and De Vries, and I think obviously right now Albon over De Vries is looking like a much better choice, given he's a year younger and is driving at a much better level. Obviously, De Vries is still kind of fresh to F1, but yeah, I don't know. I mean, I'd love to see Williams get back up there, of course. And with the ATR, all the ATR stuff they're getting being bottom, if they're bottom by end of this month now, if they're still bottom of the constructors, then they get the full ATR for then the next half of this year. They've just got to now with Vowles in shot, because I'm super impressed with James Vowles. I think maybe he is the man to take him forward, at least from the outside looking in. He seems like the way he talks about stuff is very, very impressive. So it could all just be PR, but I don't know. I've got some belief now that Vowles is in charge, that maybe that could be this, because I'd love to see Williams back at the top, of course.
I mean, you touched on your interest in the sort of story that's been broadcast of F1. So how did you get into content creation and F1 even yourself?
I mean, how I got into F1, I honestly I can't say, because I was the only, like, my parents weren't into it, my mates weren't into it. I was into cars as a kid. Like, I've just always been obsessed with cars. Like, I'd be able to, like, when I was literally like single digits, I'd just sit in there like naming all the cars, like Cavalier, like Mondeo, whatever. Like, I've just always been obsessed with cars. And then obviously that led on to watching motorsport on the telly, be that touring cars, rally, F1, whatever. So, but I can't like go and ask, like, oh, when was my first F1 race? Like, when did I watch it, mum? Like, because she didn't give a shit. Like, she didn't care.
Yeah.
So that was probably just to keep me occupied and stop me being a pain in the ass. So, and then in terms of content creation, yeah, I mean, I used to do football stuff. That's how I kind of got started making videos. Because to be honest, I just wanted to. I've always, I did product design at university. I did graphic design after that. I've done photography. I've done
Was there one video that blew you up, like blew your channel up?
Yeah, there was. It's funny because there was like, I went through it. There were 7 videos that I made in a period where like I made these 7 videos, and then none of them got it. I had like less than 100 views over these 7 videos, right? And now 3 of those videos are over 100,000 views. So it wasn't like they were bad videos. It just wasn't, they weren't getting out there. And I'd made these 7 videos. I stopped, and I had essentially like stopped and kind of gave up on it a bit. There was some personal stuff. My dad passed away, and I took some time away from that, like, of course, with that. And then it was like over Christmas, yeah, like end of 2019. I just remember checking my email, and like I got loads of subscribers on my email, and I was like, what the hell? And I looked, and one of my videos, I got some Rich Energy and compared it to Red Bull and did like a taste test. It's such a like weird video to blow up. But it coincided with Josh Revel. He'd done his 1,000 subscriber special like a few days before. 1,000 subscribers for Josh. That's proper throwback. And he'd got some Rich Energy, and so I feel like maybe that fed into, I don't know. They somehow bounced off of each other and both got viewership. And yeah, that was the one that kind of lit the fuse. And then I followed it up with like predictions videos and stuff like that, which always did well in that football space, and also did well on the F1 side of things. So, but yeah, that was the one that was the antithesis behind it all, I guess.
So it was all YouTube, like it wasn't TikTok or nothing, because this day and age you gotta use TikTok to help blow you.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, like, this was what, 2019, middle of 2019 when I started. So, well, how old would you boys have been then?
I 17.
Yeah,
Yeah.
17, yeah.
Yeah. 7.
You've
been
babies back then, man. Babies. Like it's changed so much. Like TikTok it was still Musically, wasn't it, back then or something? I don't know.
Yeah.
Like, it wasn't like short form
online.
wasn't the thing that it is now, right? And I think the YouTube space has changed massively as well in that time. But yeah, like what that is 3.5 years, which in the scheme of like the internet is a long time. So yeah, it was all long form YouTube. Still haven't really cracked the short form. I just can't be arsed with it, to be honest.
Oh, don't worry. I don't think no one knows the code for it. It's so hard. One video does well, another video does 200 views.
It seems like for us, like anything about Lewis Hamilton just goes crazy. Team LH really come out of there with their sticks whenever you say anything about Lewis Hamilton.
I think that's what these kind of, I mean, almost every driver. I mean, Charles Leclerc's extreme fan base is surprisingly potent, and like they don't realize that the more they react, the more they are like ultimately, putting your content out there. Like by moaning about it, they are like feeding it as well. It's crazy.
Have you ever had any run-ins with a certain fan base like that's not taken
Oh,
too kindly to
of
something you said?
course, absolutely, yes. Well, look, to be honest, that where that mainly happens is on Twitter, unsurprisingly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I think that's because when I put a video on YouTube, and most of the people watching, I'll get about half my views from subscribers, which is quite a high percentage. And so most people, when I'm talking about something, they know my views on certain drivers. They know my beliefs. So when I say things, they interpret it with, it's like when you're chatting amongst yourselves, right? You know that you've got a favorite driver, so when you talk about it, you're gonna. It's like subconsciously you take all that into consideration. You give a bit of benefit of doubt, if whatever. But on Twitter, it's just like sometimes that I see it and I'm like, you're a dickhead. Like someone just clips up this tiny little thing, puts it on Twitter, and then it all just goes like it's crazy, and it's like that's the one. I mean, yeah, Verstappen fans, Hamilton fans, Leclerc fans, Alonso fans, Perez fans. Yeah, I've if they've got a significant fan base, I've probably upset them at some way, shape, or form, because people don't understand that you can really support a driver, but also when they have a shocker, you call it out. You don't just blindly defend them. Again, I'm a West Ham fan, so maybe that's just built into me that I don't just blindly support everything that my sporting support club / driver does. But there you go.
Yeah.
I think Dan's a Leeds fan, so I think he definitely knows what you're saying
Yeah.
there.
Oh, tough, mate. Tough. That's some
get me
introspection
started.
now, right?
Yeah, don't get me started on them.
In your time on YouTube and doing podcasts and stuff, you've obviously interviewed some very interesting people. But is there anyone who stood out to you, or an interview that you maybe want to get in the future?
Yeah, I mean, there's obviously the one that personally stood out was Johnny Herbert, just because we're from like the same place. Like my childhood home is like 15-minute walk from his. So that was obviously something special to me on like a personal level. I'm gutted he's not on Sky Sports anymore as well. I thought he was really good, but again, I'm probably biased. And yeah, good in terms of because a lot of them have been like audio kind of like chats like this over Zoom and that. So it's obviously a bit more difficult to get a read on someone. I think there was one that was really good actually when I did last year. They had that Any Driven Monday on Sky Sports, and I kind of guest presented that a couple of times. And we had Barrichello and Montoya on, and them two were jokes. Like they were like taking the piss out of each other and like shooting the shit. Like even before we started recording and afterwards as well, and like talking about their sons racing against each other and that. And it was them two, like you could tell they were like, and they're from a generation before where, especially JPM, he was like no nonsense, like proper. You see these like NASCAR drivers having fights and having like Montoya was that of that breed where he just didn't give a toss, and he would just say what he wanted to say. And yeah, them two together was good. That they were really good. Good. Like what you saw on camera was exactly what they were like off camera, which is always. And to be fair, I've encountered that with everyone I've spoken to. I can't think of anyone who's kind of come across disingenuous like off camera, but yeah, them two were great.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose in the world of football, some people have said that like footballers are actually the most interesting people themselves. But do you think that if you could pick anyone other than Alex Albon to interview right now, who do you think were the first names that would come to mind?
What in terms of what would I want to? Because there's certain drivers that I think I could sit down and chat with really well, but there's other drivers I'd be really interested because I think Esteban Ocon is like such a down to earth like bloke from everything I've heard, like multiple people I've spoken to, like he's like the most approachable and like nicest F1 driver. So it's mad like the way people sometimes like perceive him and speak about him is crazy because I feel like it's so far from the truth. But I do think that Yeah, I think Max is like so real. Like I feel like I'd love to like, sit down with Max and just not talk about F1. Like do like, a video talking with Max, but we talk about anything other than F1. And I think like you'd get, I don't know, it'd just be really interesting to like get that insight into him because I think he does showcase that. He puts a lot of himself out there, doesn't he, with like the streaming that he does and that. But yeah, I think Max is what you see is what you get. I think with him, that's from everyone I've spoken to who's dealt with him. You know, it's which is nice. I think people, you know, you can love or hate all these different characters. You know, you look at drivers who are more like PR media trained, like George Russell, for example. But just because you've got that more PR media trained doesn't mean like, you know, unfortunately, there's a lot of people don't like George Russell, and I think part of it is because maybe people don't see him as being. Maybe that is him. I don't know, but the perception of being genuine, even if that genuine nature is a bit abrasive. You know, you're never going to be liked by everyone, so you just got to be yourself, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, you talked about Max then. There's been quite a few rumors, aren't there, that he's, you know, thinking about retirement already. Can you see him staying past his current contract?
I think he'll go. I think if I had to put money on it, I think he'll be off in 28 because I think you look at these drivers and you try and understand what's the reason, what's the motivation for them to stay in the sport? Because obviously, you know, you're flying all around the world, especially if you've got, you know, which Max doesn't at the moment. Obviously, he's you know he's with Kelly and Kelly's got a kid, but there's what's in it for you to carry on doing it, carry on traveling the world. Like Rosberg retired super early, but then Kimi, you know, he's got family and kids, but he, you know, that's part of the reason why he went to Sauber, so he'd be closer to home, and still kept doing it till he was, you know, in his 40s. And Fernando, you know, he's super motivated by Formula One, and he's got it feels like Fernando's got the attitude that Max has right now, but I don't think Max will have the attitude that Fernando does now when he's 41, 42. You got to remember that Max started super early, didn't he? He started when he was 17. So by the time 2028 comes along, he'll have been in F1 for, is it 12 or 13 years? It'll be a long time. I mean that's how it should be measured, I think. And he said that he wants to do other stuff because he just loves racing. Like, you know, Nico Rosberg could have retired and done, you know, Indy or endurance or all that, and he just didn't want to. He didn't want to do it anymore, and that's fine. Like these drivers are just people at the end of the day, and just like any job, it's like for everything that Max has said, I believe him because I just think, you know, what's in it for him to carry on? Like he could carry on to 2028, win another 2, 3, 4 world titles. Do I think he's massively bothered about the records? I mean, the records are nice. I think Lewis, do I think he's massively bothered? I mean, again, the records are nice. I don't think they're super motivated by these records, but he can go off and do, you know, a bit of WEC, a bit of IndyCar, and then he could come back. Like we see drivers, you know, leave and come back. It happens. And a driver of Max's caliber, I'm sure he'd be welcomed back by any team. So yeah, I could definitely see him leaving F1, if not just temporarily at the end of 28, definitely.
Tom, I just want to ask about the last lap. What's it like being a part of that?
Yeah, it's good. It's funny because I always had when I started doing F1 YouTube, I always had this idea. I wanted my kind of own kind of watch along live show kind of thing. And we've seen that format kind of well versed in kind of the football space again. And yeah, you know what? It's nothing beats like this is great doing this over Zoom, but nothing beats like in person chat interaction. Like that's something that just won't ever be replicated by doing it over video calls. So I think that part is like really nice. And just again, this is a sport that I've always consumed on my own because not until like adult life where, you know, now I've got lots of mates who are into F1. But this was never a sport that I watched with people. It was always my own thing. And so having that, being able to bounce off of other people is like super nice and super like rewarding to me. And it gives me as well, like, you know, this job is amazing. Like what I do, I'm so like lucky and grateful and privileged to be able to do what I do. But part of the working for yourself and working from home, and that's just not just exclusive to YouTube, is it can be very like isolating. I'm on my own a lot of the time. It's like getting out and having that interaction and chatting with interesting people is always, it's always a pleasure. So yeah, I think the space is kind of crying out for maybe more of that kind of stuff. And I think that there's a real still now, I think there's opportunity for formats that again have been well traversed in other sports, but not so much in F1. So I think it's good. I enjoy it. It's good fun.
I think the set's amazing. I know you're the creative guy yourself. How much say did you have in the set?
So we kind of, I had a little, we had a few, they put together some like ideas because the production company fellas, they kind of worked with some like people that they work with on all their sets for all their different podcasts that they run. And yeah, they had a few different variations, and it was more just about getting the shape, being like, okay, it's going to be like 4 people. And then just, how do we kind of, in terms of what's the color palette and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, in terms of those kind of things, that's where kind of I very much, because I had a vision at the start of what I wanted it to be in terms of how it would be, how it would look on camera and how it would kind of be constructed somewhat. And I think, it's pretty in line with what I had as well. But also they brought some really good ideas, like in terms of all of the use of the lights and all that kind of stuff as well. And obviously the on-screen graphics are great as well. So it really does give that, because it's still behind a paywall for a lot of people. So I think having something like that where you can really watch along and feel like you're still getting good value and good perspective from it. It's good. It's one of the things as well. It's like I have in my earpiece, I have obviously production, but I also have the race feed kind of on quiet, and it's like that's where it can sometimes be a bit tricky, because I'm trying to like listen to what's being said from like Crofty and Martin and all that, because their insight is helpful and important to understanding what's going on. But then also obviously having a conversation and doing that kind of things. But that's been part of the challenge that I think I've improved at and got better at. And that's something I'm quite grateful for as well. I think I'm a better. Again, I've never had any ambitions to be like a presenter at all, but I feel like now I've done it, I'm like, yeah, cool, this is fun. I could do more of this.
I don't know. There was a full production team. I thought, is it Lewis, the person who?
So yeah, Lewis and Alex. So Alex is the technical guy. He does all he's responsible for all of the technical stuff. He's a genius. And then Lewis as well. So there's basically 2 people, who kind of coordinate and just do all the changing of cameras and that, and tell me when there's stuff going on. There's just 2 people. So, but it's still 2 people. So
is it all in the same like studio as the other podcast that the fellas do?
Yeah, so you'd be surprised by how many, like there was at one stage 4 sets in that one room. Now there's basically our set, and then the main fellas podcast set is like directly opposite, like behind the cameras. And then there's an old set that's gonna get changed for something new, I think, soon. But they did actually have the club in there as well with us, but then it was actually the F1 and football's gonna start clashing a bit. So it's funny because I used to do, when I used to do football YouTube, I knew I used to do some bits with Boovy back then before he blew up as I don't know how much you follow the football, but he's if you think I get some stick, then oh my god, he's on another level, mate, and he invites it, he loves it.
How did it come about, being part of the fellas sort of production sort of set?
It was kind of a perfect kind of storm, really, because again, I'd always had the ambition to have this kind of thing. This is something I'd always like wanted to do, and they reached out. Elliot or Cal, I can't remember, reached out and we're like, we're interested in doing this kind of thing. I'm fairly close to London. I used to live literally a 2-minute walk from the studio. Now it's about an hour and 15 each way, so it's a bit longer now. But yeah, they just reached out and were like, "This is what we want to do. What do you think?" And I was like, "Yeah, let's do it." Like it's again, it's something that I've wanted to do. So I wanted to like right, and these I knew that these were the guys to do it with because I knew they had Alex, and I knew like his experience. Obviously, I knew Elliot and his experience. So I was like, yeah, like if I'm going to do it, like these are the people to do it with because they're going to deliver it to a level that I know I want because they have already done it in the football space.
I think the fellas studios are taking over the podcasting world, to be honest, with all the podcasting they've got going. Or like,
I feel like every week I go there, there's like, oh, we've got another new podcast. Okay, no, that's you doing right, yeah.
Just all over TikTok. It's just their podcast they produce and all that. Do you have any
Well,
other
I mean,
big
if
plans
they've got
coming
space for us, then
I'll be taking over them.
There's always that's the thing, lads. There's always going to be like what are your I want to ask you a question. Like, what are your ambitions with this as such, and how does this? Because you say you're studying like journalism. So like, what's the kind of end goal for you guys? Do you have an end goal as such, or is this something that you're just kind of? Because I think there's just as much value in just seeing this as an opportunity to chat to people and work on those kind of skills, and not necessarily have it. Oh, we need this to be the biggest thing in the world, right?
To be honest, so with all journalists, so I started a website and called it Tire Talk, so people in uni can write for it and showcase their skills. But I want it to like be like your podcast, if you get me. I want it to be big. I don't want to do it just as a little thing. It's all right to get my name out there, our name out there, but I want it to be a big thing, to be honest.
We kind of started it because so our like the rooms that we have our lectures and sessions and stuff is just across from like there's a little podcast studio just across from where we do our sessions, and it's basically just like 4 mics, a computer, and like one of the big sort of set things, and we just thought it was a great opportunity. Like we could use it for free. Obviously, it's turned out that we're on Zoom quite a lot because in between uni sort of semesters and stuff, we're miles away from each other. But we just thought it was a great opportunity, really, and it sort of almost would have felt like a bit of a waste. We're all talkative, relatively loud people. I think it would have felt like a bit of a waste to not have, because we have these chats anyway. We're talking about it with some of my other friends, like we have these chats anyway about football and stuff. It would just seem like a bit of a waste almost to there's a podcast studio right there. Why not go in there and just record it and practice some of these skills that we might need in the future. Also something to put on the CV, I guess, as well, isn't it? But I mean, we've only been doing this for a few months. We're already getting to speak to people like you. It's like, just why not? Just test the waters with everything, really.
Don't ask, don't get. That's literally that was me at the start.
Yeah.
Like, I just pinged out. That's how I got all the back then the WTF1 lot, Matt, Tom, and Jess. Like I got all them to come on my podcast when I was like a no one because you just ask. Like it's we're just people at the end of the day, and it's like I think it's like do you want to work in like what's outside of this maybe like obviously you're studying journalism, so would the idea be to work kind of in motorsport journalism in some way, shape, or form for all three of you?
I want to work in broadcast journalism.
Nice.
But I also like to be behind the camera as well.
Mm-hmm.
So like a TV director. I like the thought of that. But broadcast journalism is what I want to do. But the accent's a bit puts me off a bit of it. Not many people can understand the accent.
Nah, lean into it, man. It's your point of difference.
Yeah, be the Scouse F1.
Exactly.
There's not many Scousers on telly though. You got Carragher,
No.
but he was a football player. You got some lad Nick Pete who does the UFC. I think he's the only one that I know. That was quite hard for me with the accent, but give it a go.
You could be a trailblazer. Go for it.
Yeah, exactly, man.
Already.
Like, why not?
Exactly. Yeah. I prefer doing feature writing. I don't know if I want to do it in motorsport or football. I haven't really decided because I'm passionate about both. But like I say, this is like an opportunity for me just to test the waters, doing other stuff apart from writing. Because and I've done not like this before. So,
Mm.
like I say, just getting out my comfort zone a bit, and like I say, in the
Yeah, yeah.
future, my focus is still writing. But if an opportunity was to come to do something like this, then I would definitely like to do that as well. Yeah.
You never know where like these things can lead. Like we had Katie Fairman on last weekend, and you know her story is like super super interesting and really inspirational because like she, you know, when she was at school, she was told like she wasn't good enough to do like journalism because her English like her grades weren't great, and you know she just worked like it took her years to get like the break to get in at WTF1, and now she's flying, and it's just you know I think it's different now because it's so accessible, which is amazing to like put yourself out there. Um, you know, everyone's got a really good camera in their pocket, in their phone, and the barrier to entry is really low, which is great. But also, it means that I think it's more difficult to kind of stand out. And part of the reason I think for me it was that I got early to market. I think that's a big reason why I am where I am now. But obviously, I have my graphic design stuff, and I can do like and I had some stuff which kind of helps and kind of set, I guess, made my stuff a little bit different to just talking about F1, even though I still love just talking about F1. A lot of my videos are just talking about F1. So yeah, I think it's that there's always an opportunity, but I think you've got to do more now to really do something like big to stand out amongst a very what is a very kind of crowded space. But again, not every, you know, the skills that you guys get from this, you know, you don't know where that will manifest long term. So yeah, it's good. It's good to see.
I think all of us, like the three of us, are all big football fans as well. Me and Matty, Liverpool, and Dan obviously Leeds. But we, like I said, I mean, the football space for this is so much more crowded. Do you think maybe even for you, do you feel like if it wasn't so crowded, you just stayed with football, or do you feel like there's a bigger gap in F1?
Yeah, I think again, the part of the reason I moved away from doing football was because it just didn't. I've been doing it for like you know 2.5, 3 years, like with no. And again, I wouldn't do it for that long and get 0 views like the whole time, like hardly any. If I didn't enjoy doing it, you know, part of the reason I like making videos is because I like making videos. Like I enjoy the process of doing it all myself as well. Like I like, you know, I don't have an editor. I do all the scripts, recording, filming, editing, thumbnailing. I do all that myself, and I enjoy that. Um, but yeah, I think there's obviously certain names who have kind of risen up and in kind of the independent. You look at like Thogden, Rory, you know, you look at, you know, Pitchside boys, club boys, like there's certain names who have risen up because in part because they've been doing it for a long time, but also, because they are kind of, you look at like what Thogden does when it's all like every single video, like he's in a different country, like doing mad stuff. So it's hard to kind of keep up with, you know, if there was a Thogden in F1 who was like going to every F1 race, that would be cool. It would be bloody expensive as well. So I think, to stand out is takes a bit more now. You can't just ultimately, I could just sit around and talk about F1, and because there weren't many other people doing it, the people who were interested would gravitate now. Now there's so many options. You have to do more than just sit around and talk about F1 if you want to get those big numbers, and that's difficult. It's more of a challenge now, I think. But same goes for football. Exactly the same goes for football. I think, you know, football's got a bigger audience, but there's more creators. F1's much smaller, but there's much fewer creators. And I think, I don't know if it has certainly petered off. This year's not been a banger, of course, not by like 21 standards. So I think if we get a really good season, then there's an opportunity. But I guess you've got to slog through the not so good seasons to get to the good ones, I guess.
Do you definitely feel like the growth of your channels and the success of your podcast comes alongside how good the F1 is, then
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, my numbers, like just my normal video view numbers, are like they're down on what they were kind of this time last year, because this time last year we still had the Ferrari Red Bull fight. It was, there was that battle at the front. You need that battle at the front to get the more general F1 fan interested. Um, you know, when there's not a scrap at the front. Yeah, at Miami, there were loads of really good overtakes, but because there wasn't that real battle at the front, yeah, people considered it a bit of a meh race. I thought it was a good race, but if you look at it, and I get it, and I suppose, yeah, it's one of the things where, yeah, we are reliant. The thing with football, there's always going to be good football games going on. There's always going to be an interesting game in isolation, and I guess an F1 race can be interesting in isolation, but also it reflects on the rest of the year, and it is different in that way. I think F1 is more reliant. Yeah, F1 content creation is more reliant on the sport being good than football is, because there's always interesting football games. There's always, you can look at different leagues, you can look at different like competitions, whatever. So yeah, I think we need the sport, and I'm sure like Liberty won't ultimately, if they let the regulations do their job, it should close up the field. It already has somewhat, if you look at the full field spread, and if you look at, from Alpine down, like, it's kind of anyone's game a lot of weekends. So yeah, I do think F1 is particularly reliant on the sport being interesting.
How do you fill in the gap? Go when there's a week off. How do you have a week off, or do you fill in the gap?
Yeah, so I mean, when I got started, like when the channel first really started to take off, was just before we went into lockdown. So um, I'm quite used to making videos not directly attached to what's going on. Like that's kind of where it got started for me. Talking more about the sport and about interesting stories, not necessarily covering what's happening this weekend or what's happening, like what just happened the weekend before. So I've got various, like, again, being able to do liveries was an interesting one, because then I could build out a series that I've done one for a while, but like, what if whatever brand like came to F1, what could that look like? What would the, like, just interesting kind of um yeah, just like interesting ideas that people might be like, oh yeah, what would that look like? But also, yeah, there's a massive catalogue of things and stories, some that I, remember and I just feel like haven't been told, and others that, you know, require a bit more kind of research, and just, I guess I always try and, we'd all come across like an interesting statistic about football or F1 on like Twitter. And it's like, how can you take that and like give it more context and give it more like meaning to tell like an interesting story that people, you know, that's the thing. You want someone to see that thumbnail and that title and be like, oh, that's interesting. Like, well, what does that mean? Like, you want to hook them in, and you want to actually back it up with with something that's actually, giving some kind of value. Because the thing is that the points don't tell the full story, do they? Like in any sport. And there's so much more to it than just, otherwise we'll just go home and just look at the points table and be like, well, this team's higher than this team, so they're better. Well, no, it's not always the case. So yeah. That's sport though, because you're saying like, you boys, you just chat amongst yourselves about football and F1, and you was like, well, right, let's just record ourselves doing it. Like literally, I think that is the purest form of what I like love to do, and like want to try and do. Like I literally, what was a couple of days ago, I was on the train, and I remember just like, I just heard a bunch of lads talking about like the F1 like amongst themselves, and I was just like, that's literally it. You're just like, have fuck the cameras and the microphones, like that's it, and it's just recording that and putting it out there. That's what people are interested in.
You know, you were saying that obviously with the football there are, I mean, tens and twenties of leagues, and there's always stuff going on. Do you think maybe that if F2 or Formula E were to grow and get a lot bigger, do you think that would help? I just think that's even possible, really, because it's so hard to even access that kind of stuff at the moment.
Yeah, I think, because I love the junior formulas. I think the F2's that's super interesting this year. and people are always going to be pulled towards the top. So like the Bundesliga is always going to have more interest than, the Portuguese league, for example, because there's a perceived higher quality of football going on. And, La Liga over the Eredivisie, like there's, so I think that I think it's a hard sell to get junior formulas in front of a more general fan base. I think that's a really hard sell. Formula E, I don't know. I just don't think it's. I mean, the viewership. For last time I checked, the viewership had gone down, relative to the year prior. I think 2022 it was lower than 2021. Yeah, Formula E is a difficult one. I think F1 does a really good job at selling the drivers, the personalities, the characters of the individuals, the people, because that's what people buy into. Otherwise, you just have remote controlled cars going around. You take the drivers out entirely for their own safety. Like, part of the reason is because of the danger, because these drivers are relatable. They're all different characters as well. And yeah, I don't know. I feel like F1 has helped convert so many people into F1 fans and so many people into now motorsport fans more broadly, which is great. But I think we're a way off F2 and Formula E really getting that mainstream attention. I think motorsport, but I think other series should learn from what F1 has done with like Drive to Survive and that, because telling those human stories, I think that's what gets people more interested, because F1 doesn't have the tribal kind of attachment that we have to our football clubs. That apart from Ferrari, that just doesn't exist in F1 and in motorsport, and it's not gonna. So it needs to find another way of, bringing people in. And I think the human stories of F1 drivers, I think they tell them stories a lot better in F1 than they do in football. I think maybe football could do that even better, personally. But I think that's the way these other series expand and get bigger. But I think we're a way off that.
No, I definitely agree. I feel like. No, you go, Dan. You go.
I was just going to say, out of interest, who do you think is going to win the Formula 2 this year?
Oh, I mean, I could see like Vesti is just really consistently up there. I mean, my favorite Owassa's my favorite, and I'd love to see him win. But I think if I had to put money on it, I mean, Porsche is always going to be up there, but he's got a bottle in him. I think over the course, Martins has been quick, but he's just hasn't got the points. I think if I had to put a name on it now, I would probably say, I know he's leading at the minute, but I do think probably Vesti, because he's had time. He's in a really good team, and I just think the consistency. I don't think he'll win the most races, but I think he'll just consistently be up there. I mean, you look at like Kushmani, he's like fourth, isn't he?
Yeah,
and he's just been really consistent rookie season. Like, again, I don't think he'll win the title, but I think there's a lot to be said for consistency in motorsport over having those really high highs, and I think that's where Porsche might fall short.
Yeah.
I was going to say, you was talking about Drive to Survive, and I know that for me, when I was getting into F1, it was firstly through Drive to Survive, sort of during lockdown. And you talk about the stories of each driver and stuff. I definitely, I want to say I definitely agree with that. Sort of, I feel like when you're watching it and you don't really know what's going on, or you don't know who each person is, it's very different to when you know the drivers. And I suppose, is there other than sort of Alex Albon, are there any other drivers on the grid maybe that you think people underestimate, maybe because they don't know more about them, or are more interested than meet the eye?
Yeah, I do. I think there's I think there's a few. I think Yuki's a driver that I think he came into the sport very raw and a very very rough diamond that's kind of somewhat improving now. I think he's one of those like he's a character that, you know, hear him blowing up a lot on the radio, and kind of people, you know, maybe read into that a bit too much, because I think, you know, there's a degree of, you know, obviously he's Japanese driver is a big learning curve. It's a big culture change, you know, not just, I mean, it's a culture change coming from like South America, like Checo had to like come to Europe, but like you come from Japan to kind of the UK and Europe, it's there's a bit of a barrier there, and I think he's kind of a somewhat misunderstood character, because I do think he's a really serious driver, and it's quite easy to like look at all that and not take him seriously, I guess. But again, I reference Esteban Ocon. You know, I talked about him in my latest video, and like I've talked about him. What my main video I did on him was like over 2 years ago, and his story is like, if you're looking for drivers who have got like a really interesting path into F1, kind of like Lewis Hamilton, where they didn't really come from much. I mean, Esteban's story is like incredible, and that's what I am drawn towards. You know, succeeding in a sport that's so dominated by, you know, these big names who have passed down generations, your Rosbergs, your Verstappens, your Hills, whatever. And yeah, I think Esteban's got a really relatable, really human story that I don't think's been like fully told. I'd love to see Esteban do like a feature with Sky or something, like going back to his home, like his garage where he grew up, like above the garage, and looking at the motorhome that they lived in and drove around Europe, like, and all the work he had to do himself, where all the other drivers had like proper teams and personnel employed. That's the kind of stuff that I think would create a lot more support and an understanding around a driver like him, who's seen as this really like terrible teammate, which I think when you look at his story, like, well, yeah, but he's had to fight tooth and nail for everything, because, you know, unlike most of the others who've had a lot handed to them on a plate, he didn't. So yeah, I think him and Yuki are the two that immediately come to mind for that.
I think Yuki Tsunoda just wants a restaurant, doesn't he? He just wants to open his own restaurant.
He does.
That's all
He
he
loves
wants.
food, doesn't he?
That's all he wants.
Yuki's food reviews. He needs to do food reviews at every Grand Prix. That'd be great content, Alpha Terry.
Yeah. It's on TikTok as well. On TikTok, it'll blow.
That pop, definitely.
Do you think Yuki's the natural heir to the Checo seat at Red Bull?
Well, the thing is, I think, you know, Checo overall, yes, he had a stinker at Monaco, but overall I think he's stepped up to a range where he's close enough to Max that he's not gonna that he can usually pick up the pieces, and he is still P2 in the championship. But he's not so close that he's really gonna take loads of points off of Max and derail a championship, a driver's title bid, because we've got hope that Aston Martin, Mercedes, maybe Ferrari will be much closer next year. So then that's where, you know, if Checo's taking too many points away from Max, then that starts to hurt you from a driver's championship point of view. Now, obviously, it depends what Red Bull want. Do they want? Are they at risk of losing Yuki? Like, if he continues on this, he's having a really strong season so far. You know, what do they lose from putting Yuki into that Red Bull seat? There's pros and cons to that one. I think that, you know, Checo's doing a great job at the moment. It's a difficult decision. I mean, you know, Checo lost his seat like very unfairly when Vettel took his place after, you know, Checo had been like driver of the year in 2020, and Vettel had a bit of a stinker, but that's the way it goes sometimes. It's the politics of Formula One. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see with Yuki. I do think, you know, he's still super young. He's like 23. This is his third year in the sport, and I think he's shown that he's at least, you know, last year he was very close to Gasly, and if he carries on that same trajectory, maybe he is that. And because I think Red Bulls have also got to think long term, as you know, Max saying about 2028 being that time. I know that's 5 years away, but time flies, right? And they'll be, I'm sure, thinking about that in the back of their mind. Like, if Max was to leave at the end of 2028, that's 5 years' time. Yuki will be 28 then. That sounds like pretty prime years to me. So yeah, maybe bringing him in alongside Max, in a, maybe not next year, maybe the year after that, and then giving him a few years alongside Max to get good, and then he takes on when Max leaves, maybe.
Tom, you mentioned Aston Martin there. Do you think Aston Martin can challenge with Lance Stroll in the car?
Yeah, I've seen this talked about a bit, right? It depends what you mean by challenge. From a constructor's point of view, no, they can't. They definitely can't. Like, he's on his day. And I think he's a good driver, but he's very inconsistent. And I think when you want a constructors championship, you want to score lots of points. The same thing I said about Vesti in F2. Like, you need that consistency, right? And unfortunately for Lance, more like he was unlucky in Monaco. He did catch some damage from Lando hitting the wall, which curtailed his qualifying, right? That's unlucky. But you look at the points even before Monaco, and you look at the opportunities and the delta of pace between him and Alonso. I think if they want to win a constructors, yeah, he's definitely going to hold them back. If they want to win a driver's title, I don't think he'll hold them back, because again, that's a clear 1-2. Say you've got, let's say for example, you've got Red Bull, you've got Mercedes, and you've got Aston Martin, right up there. Well, Max and Checo, there's a big enough gap that Max is going to be ahead of Checo almost all the time, right? Fine. Same says for Aston Martin. Alonso is going to be ahead of Alonso 9 all the time. But then Lewis and George, I mean, feel like they're pretty equal. So they're going to be taking more points off of each other. And then the chance of either of them winning a driver's championship compared to Max and Fernando is much less. So no, I don't think it. I think Lawrence is fine with it, to be honest. I think he's going to give him time. I don't think he's going anywhere, because I think that ultimately constructors championships are great, but drivers championships are what are remembered, and that's what would put, Aston Martin's stock price up. You know what I mean? Like, it's winning a drivers championship. No one cares that Ferrari won the 2008 constructors. It was all about Lewis winning it. Yeah. So I think as much as, constructors, yes, drivers, no. And I don't think Lawrence will care that much, because he'll bankroll it anyway. So
do you not think there's any chance, like, what do you think it would take for Lawrence Stroll to say, to sit Lance down and say, look, mate, you're not cutting it?
Look, I think Lawrence is as aware as anyone else, right? That, but then sure, if you're going to hire Fernando Alonso, you're hiring someone to do the job, and I think it does speak a degree of. It's interesting how much closer Stroll was to Vettel than he is to Alonso. The Vettel fans won't like that, but there you go. That's one of the fan bases that I've upset most of all. And I think that, yeah, the one thing I guess is that, look, obviously Lawrence Stroll is the figurehead, but he doesn't own 100% of Aston Martin. He doesn't own 100% of Aston Martin F1 team. There are other shareholders. There are other people in the mix at the very top, like, board level. So, I mean, he's not a Latifi. Like, he's not doing an absolute shocking job. Like, yes, relative to Fernando, he's not doing a great job. And you look at how relatively close Ocon was to Alonso over the last 2 seasons. Behind, for sure. But, I mean, almost equal in qualifying. And you look at now Stroll and Alonso, and it's like Alonso's doing the job that he was hired to do. I just think that the only way that changes, is if, like, the board vote no confidence or something like that. I don't know. I'm not sure how it's all, like, laid out at the top of the team, but yeah, that it just doesn't feel like realistic to me, because again, like, when Schumacher was winning championships, there was a Barrichello in the other car. Stroll could be that Barrichello, still like win the odd race, still, if they give him the car, he could win the odd race. I mean, he's already been on the podium like multiple times, so that doesn't happen. That's not just luck. Yeah, of course, luck's a factor, but you have to take your opportunities when you get them presented to you. So he's got it in his locker. It's just the locker seems closed at the minute, locked, if anything.
Did you end up
I think
bidding on the Aston Martin sign, Tom?
Well, I don't know if is it started yet. Actually, that's a good question. I'm gonna have to check that. Do you boys know about this? The Aston Martin.
Are you actually going to bid on it, or are you just messing?
Fuck that, man. That is huge. Mate, I'd love to, but that'll go for like. Surely that'll be in the thousands. Surely.
I reckon you replace your 100,000 subscribers sign and
Do you
put the
reckon?
Aston Martin
Just put it up
down
there.
Yeah.
If it was just the side itself, but it comes with a whole concrete thing
Oh,
around
it's
it and
the
all the
whole.
stones as well.
Oh, no.
Yeah, it's the whole
Yeah.
thing. So I'm a bit
Put it in
like,
the front
ugh.
garden.
Yeah. I'm not sure if
God.
I feel like divorce papers might be served to me if that happens, but maybe there's room in the back garden. I don't know. No,
What's the toilet? What's the toilet like? What you buy? What like?
yeah, it's weird, isn't it? So
Get like a
for anyone
door.
listening who doesn't know, so Aston Martin are obviously they're getting rid of all of their stuff because they've just moved into their new gaff and they're getting rid of all the stuff from their old base, which obviously used to be Force India and loads of other teams before that. But yeah, the toilets are all still orange and green, like the Force India days, man. I love that. It's so sick.
I just want to know
But
what you win.
yeah, it is weird, isn't it? Do you get all the tiles from the wall, or is it just
Get like a toilet seat.
Yeah, I don't know. I am half tempted to try and get something that just isn't too ridiculous, and then just make a video around it because that would actually be a good video.
Is there more things on the website?
I think there's like, hang on, I'm literally on it now. There's how many lots are there? There's 234 lots available. So, and was it it starts tomorrow at midday, the auction, and it ends on a week later, basically. So, watch this space, lads. Maybe.
Might put a £1 bid in to the side.
I did see there's a bespoke trophy cabinet, and I was trying to think of a Tottenham related tweet, but I couldn't really think of it. That was that. Oh, it doesn't come with the trophies, lads. Sorry. Very living.
Definitely love taking the piss out of Tottenham. You touched briefly on Mercedes. This is the last question from me. How long do you think it'll be before they're challenging for a title again?
I mean, I think their hope is that their best hope is that that Red Bull are close to the ceiling of what could be achieved. You think like diminishing returns. It will get to the stage where, Red Bull upgrade will add like a fraction of a tenth rather than a tenth. I mean, Red Bull bringing upgrades to Spain, right? So as everyone starts to reach that ceiling, Red Bull reach it, then probably Aston, maybe Ferrari, and then all of a sudden you've got 4 teams that are like close to that ceiling. I think as well the issue, kind of issue in a way, is that all the drivers are too good. I think the level of caliber of F1 drivers today is better than it has ever been, like across the entire field. Yes, you had your Sennas and your Schumachers and your Prosts in the past, but also the drivers at the back were absolute nobodies. Like now you've got quality throughout, so the car is going to make the bigger difference, and I think that's why we're now seeing, even though gap relative Red Bull relative to the next best team, there's been bigger gaps before, but I think because everyone's so good and everyone's so consistent, it's hard to overcome that. Now, obviously, Mercedes have 2 of the best, most consistent drivers out there in Lewis and George. So I think maybe by the second half of next year, they'll be competing for race wins. I could definitely see like another team, at least one other team, by the end of this year, being able to challenge for race wins with Red Bull. The thing is, Red Bull will have already won like most of the races. They've already won all of the races so far this year. So that won't change the championship order. But I think, second half of next year is probably where I see Mercedes finally catching up enough to actually challenging. That's my best bet, I'd say.
Thank you very much for taking time out of your day to talk to us. It's been a massive pleasure. Make sure to, I mean, it feels a bit stupid, but if you've not seen Tommo already, make sure to check him out on socials, because we've got such a massive following. But no, seriously, thank you for spending time with us today. Make sure to check out our socials, guys, on Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, and obviously YouTube and Spotify. But yeah, that's all from us. Thank you very much to Tommo again. We'll see you next time. Thank you.